Hey, welcome to the Evans Library podcast. I am joined today by Father Randall Meissen.
Hi there.
Randall. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on. Let me read a little bio here. So Father Randall Meissen is a Roman Catholic priest and a member of the Legionnaires of Christ. He received a BA in biology from Rice University, philosophy and theology degrees from the Pontifical Athenaeum Regina Apostolorum, and master's degrees in Latin from the University of Florida and in history from the University of Southern California. His interests include religion, the history of science, and colonial Latin American history. He is chaplain and director of Catholic Campus Ministries at Florida Tech and serves as an adjunct faculty in the College of Psychology and Liberal Arts, where he teaches courses on world religions, biblical literature, and history. And after that, I think we're out of time for that lengthy bio, but I was talking to somebody and I said, I about going to daily mass. I says I just walk across campus and go to daily mass. And so she was very confused as to, is there a priest who just comes to campus every day? And I said, no, there's a priest who is assigned to the campus. He's assigned to the Catholic Campus Ministry. I said, he's like Father Mike Schmitz. So everybody knows Father Mike, University of Minnesota Duluth. Mm-hmm. And that got me thinking that, he did the Bible in a year, and he did the Catechism in a year. So we need a Father Randall does something in a year. You could maybe read like the Summa or something in a year and explain it to us.
Oh, I don't know. I think maybe these priests that are more talented and out there in the social media world, they do. I mean, the Bible in a year is quite an undertaking.
Yes.
I think I'm lucky to get through anything in a year, much less the Bible in a year.
Yes, and it's interesting because I have some Protestant friends who were who started that, and then they realized, well, there's some differences in the Old Testament books. And so they didn't quite know what to do when they got to some of those first and second Maccabees and other ones. So they tried to look around for a better Bible in a year, but at least for them.
Oh,
so, yeah.
Well, that's there's probably less familiarity. Those are some books there that the Catholics call deuterocanonicals, but they got in the history of Bibles and Bible translations, they got tucked away is in kind of an appendix called the Apocrypha in most of the Protestant Bibles, and then some of them leave them out altogether now, so they're shocked about books they've never heard tell of before.
Yes, yeah, and I have a couple books of apocryphal or a book of apocryphal books, and the Book of Enoch is one of my favorite of the apocryphal books. And I kept trying to get one church I was at to do a Bible study on the Book of Enoch and the Watchers and all that, but
they didn't go. For
that. We're not doing that. I was like, well, it's canonical in the Orthodox Church of Ethiopia, so I feel like that should count.
Well, certainly. I mean, I think sometimes these books get a bad rep. The term apocrypha is kind of a way of like putting them down as though they're not significant. But I tell people, if you come to my office and you look at my bookshelf, the bookshelf is full of writings that are great works of spirituality, and not all of them make the cut. Not everything made the cut to be at that highest level of inclusion in what became the Bible. But that doesn't mean that they're not worth study or that they're also not of value for our learning and our own spiritual growth and things like that.
Yeah, and there's some really, really interesting, fascinating things like in the Book of Enoch, and the Book of Jubilees is another one. I think that Book of Jubilees is where is that where the fall of Lucifer is in that? I forget what is in that book that we kind of take for granted, but it's like nowhere else in the Bible. I can't remember now.
Yeah, and there's lots of stories of things that kind of come into art and literature that are taken out of what you'd consider the New Testament Apocrypha. So there, every book is different, but something like the Proto-Evangelium of St. James is really quite rich. It's things like the parents of the Blessed Virgin Mary, Jesus's grandparents are given names there. So there's things that come into tradition and literature and art in particular that are not always squarely in in the books that rose to inclusion in the Bible, but they're in these other sometimes very rich and spiritually helpful ancillary texts. But then again, there's also there's things that are wild and crazy as well. There's also Gnostic sorts of writings, things like the secrets. Secret Gospel of John, I think, is one, and then you're into kind of a world of Greek Platonic philosophy and speculation and things, and right away you realize, oh, this doesn't have much at all to do with anything connected with the Bible.
Yeah. So there, and I always thought that Apocrypha meant not true, but it just it doesn't mean that, right? And it doesn't mean that you can't learn something from those books. But you probably shouldn't give stand up and give a sermon on the Book of Enoch, but doesn't mean that you can't learn something from it, and it doesn't mean there's not, like you said, a rich spirituality and history in some of those books. So it's very interesting. Now you're from Missouri, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I grew up there on a small farm in kind of northwestern Missouri. My parents are sort of semi-retired now, but they still have a cattle ranch, so they raise beef cattle and do some corn and soybean farming too. So that's when I describe it, it doesn't sound terribly much like they're retired. That's retirement for farmers in Missouri.
Yeah, I was thinking that's a lot of work, actually.
It is, yeah. As having grown up there, I can attest that's a lot of work.
Yeah, and so the former dean of the College of Engineering and Science here, he's now the provost at Missouri S&T. So I had this conversation with him, and I'll ask you: is it Missouri or Missouri?
Well, I'm from north of the Missouri River, so we pronounce it as Missouri, and it's historically been the farther south you go toward, especially the Ozarks region, kind of straddling the border with Arkansas. The standard pronunciation had long been Missouri. Yeah. But like everything else, I think in the world of modern media, some of those regional distinctions and accent are kind of eroding, so I don't know if that still holds.
Yeah, I read an interesting article recently about this. The author called it Diner Gothic. So this idea that like regional accents and all that, regional ways of maybe preparing food and all that have sort of flattened out and kind of gone away, and they're now sort of national or been forgotten. But it also applies to the various ways that subcultures would present and dress themselves. So I see 16 and 17-year-olds who kind of have this mix of like goth plus punk plus like raver plus like video game, and it's just like, when I was growing up, like you had to pick one of those things. You couldn't be all of those together. But it is an interesting thing. I think the internet and all of this has really flattened out those kind of regional differences to where they just don't exist anymore.
Yeah, or you just wait long enough and you realize at some point, oh, I must be old because what went out of style has come back into style. And that goes, I think bell bottoms made a return voyage once or twice already in my lifetime, and tie-dye t-shirts. There's things that kind of, you think they're gone, and like Dracula, they're back from the grave.
Yeah, I will often see students walking around, and I think, man, they dress just like I did in college, and I've seen a return of certain brands around, and I just think, boy, yeah, I'm getting old if I keep seeing these things come back. So, it's kind of a I don't know, maybe a long way from sort of the Missouri farm to the Pontifical Athenaeum Regina Apostolorum. So maybe kind of a little bit about how that journey went for you, how you growing up on a farm, and then how did you kind of discern your calling into the priesthood, and how did that all kind of work for you?
Sure. So I think I was very fortunate in being in a very rural part of Missouri. Nonetheless, we had a really great Catholic grade school. So a very small place, maybe about 120 students between kindergarten to 8th grade, but a very, very strong ethic around the value of education and the value of study there in this farming community. So from pretty young, I had instilled in me the worth of studying hard, of doing extremely well, of working hard on the farm as well. But we had a kind of a very robust value in the extended family around the place of academics. So from relatively young, I decided I was not going to grow up to be a farmer, but that I was going to go and become a heart surgeon, do something with medicine. And I really focused on that. And that led me to getting into college at Rice University down in Houston, Texas, where I was in good company. I think out of my class there, around maybe 130 or 140 got into medical school out of a class of 500. So it was a pretty sizable plurality at a relatively small university. And that's what I did. I got into medical school and would have gone back to the University of Missouri in Columbia to do medical school there. But along the way, I had a pretty profound kind of intervention of God in my life. That's sort of a reconversion to my faith. A close friend of mine, my debate team partner, we did competitive debate in college. We were both involved in a car accident coming back from a debate tournament, and he was killed, and that really shook me up, and it also made me pause at that young stage in life and take stock of what is motivating me. Am I living a life that's fundamentally for myself? And sort of in taking stock of that, I realized all of these things. Certainly, I think medicine is one of those areas of profession that lends itself to be very vocational. It at its best, it's very much a work of service to people in need. But looking at myself in the mirror and asking myself those questions honestly, that was not my motivation. I was in it for the money and also very much for the prestige. That imagine how proud people will be that there's a doctor in the family. Oh my gosh, So that really strokes your vanity in a pretty direct way. So then I started praying a lot about, well, okay, God, I can see I'm not going on the path I'm on for the purest of reasons. If you want something of my life, let me know. Mm-hmm. And I'm open to whatever you ask me to do. And I was praying that simple prayer in the entryway of a church, and I looked up on the opposite wall, and there was a big poster that said, "If you're waiting for a sign from God, this is it. Join the priesthood." And it hit me like a ton of bricks, and I just had a really kind of odd experience of clarity that God had answered what I was praying in that moment, and then I started exploring. Okay, well, God's called me to be a priest. How do I do this? And then I found my way after that.
Oh, that's a great story. It actually reminds me of there's a podcast called What God Is Not. They're Byzantine Catholic, the Eastern Catholics. It's a priest and a nun, and the mother was talking about discerning whether to go into into the convent or not, and sort of praying for a sign. And it's somehow like Saint Therese of Lisieux had gotten involved in sort of this, and like walking into the church and there being a bunch of roses on up on the altar, and no one really knew where they came from. And she said, "Well, that's still not good enough. I need a better sign than that." But it's a really great story. And so how do you, I'm sure a large part of what you do working with young men and women on campus to help discern their vocation. So, what are some of the advice or things that you talk to them about, or ways that they can kind of figure out where they should go in life?
Yeah, I think there are a multitude of factors that go into any sort of major decision in life. So, and not all the decisions that we make really merit the same level of reflection and scrutiny. So I'd never say that I'm going to discern what I'm going to have for dinner tonight. That's kind of, we're people of free will, and really the driving factor is what's what's good to eat and what's appealing to you. Those are sort of the factors. And maybe if you're eating someone else, the principle of charity would overwhelm that, and you'd say, okay, well, you like Italian food. Maybe I don't want Italian food, but I'll be charitable and eat that with you. But that's not really discernment in a big way. So it's those kind of pivot moments, those things that have long and lasting and weighty effects in life. The question of fundamentally what do you want to do vocationally as married life versus religious life versus some other modality of service in life. Some of the adjacent questions about the type of livelihood that one devotes oneself to. Am I going into the right, broadly speaking, the right sort of career area, education or medicine? Those things I think properly can be called a manner of calling, and they merit some more lengthy and more weighty discernment. But part of it is, one's aptitudes, that part of it is the gifts that God's given you, how you've been created. And then along with that, sort of the opportunity, there's the contingencies of life, so it's unlikely if that God's going to call you from where you are to go do something in some place that you've never heard of, or it's, there's overwhelming obstacles to going and doing that. So there is a practical element, and then just an ethical element, that am I living my life as best I can according to the high principles that I have as my aspirations. And then, if those are in place, someone has kind of capacities, aptitudes, things that would indicate they could be good at something and that they could be content in that decision. Then usually the extra is this coming to a point of moral certitude. Is this what, that's kind of what I would like, and that's what I could do. But is this how God is also trying to lead me on my path in life? And that's where, you take it to prayer. And usually the fruit of a good discernment is that when somebody kind of settles on a decision, that there is a sense of peace around it. Not a sense that this is going to be easy street and it's not going to be any work whatsoever, but there is a sense of peace around this. This is a purpose that is worth the sacrifices or the effort that's entailed in achieving it and pursuing it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've heard some people talk about being at like a Christian college and working with students, and there seems to be an idea for one that whatever they happen to be good at and enjoy, they should kind of do the opposite. So it's like if let's just say they were good with numbers and finance and they were going into accounting, but they should really go be like a kindergarten teacher, because somehow like a calling, what God is calling you to do, should be sort of difficult and hard and heavy to carry. And he would just be like, no, you've been given these talents by God and these skills. You should use them. Like there's like kind of this. This might have been more like maybe a Calvinist strain that you sort of had to struggle and suffer with this calling.
Yeah, I mean, in Catholic, the Catholic realm, this very much sounds like the Jansenists of the 17th century that were at Port Royal and had some overlap with Blaise Pascal and people like that. But the thought being, I guess, really at core, a skepticism about oneself and one's own capacity of judgment. That if there was something enjoyable in the decision, then there was kind of a deep suspicion of self that you're judging rightly. But the remedies to that really are a little bit of spiritual direction. If you ask an outsider who is a little bit more objective, do you think that I'm doing this just selfishly, or do you think that there's goodness to this decision? And a good spiritual advisor can give that external and that objective affirmation of what's going on. Is it really selfishness is prevailing, or is it generosity?
Yeah. And another thing I came across, and I think this is maybe the sort of bad side of social media, but where people saying, well, if you feel at peace with something, that's actually a bad sign, because the heart is a deceiver, and you've just been deceived into doing something. And I was like, come on, if I can't like feel good about it, like feel like I've come to some sort of calm and peace, then I think we're all in trouble,
Yeah, well, I mean, things that are good and holy they have a kind of captivating attractiveness to them, that they may not be easy, but they are either aesthetically or intellectually beautiful in a way that is very alluring. So I wouldn't agree with that at all. Now there's distinctions to be made in all of these topics, but that's not to say that there are not roles or tasks. There are things that need and should be done that one would react with fearfulness about, or that were times other than they are, no one would want to do. So you think of times of societal breakdown and the Great Plagues in Europe, or times of war and upheaval. There's all kinds of duties then that rise to the top of the list, and what they entail may require tremendous courage, tremendous setting aside of one's preferences, but they're the kind of thing that simply must be done for the good of others, or the good of family, or the good of community. So anyway, but there's lots of distinctions. I guess painting with an overly broad brush, there's moments of turmoil when saints are called to do great things, and they're not going to feel a superficial sort of peacefulness, a warm and fuzzy kind of peacefulness, but there should be some tranquility of mind rather than turbulence of turmoil if one's come across something that's divine in calling, or divine in origin.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point in that, because you feel at peace at something doesn't mean it's going to be easy, right? You can say, I know this is the thing that I'm supposed to do, and you feel at peace at that, and then you also go, but this is going to be really hard. There's going to be a lot of work there, and so the peace doesn't always equate to easy, but that also doesn't necessarily mean it's an overly burdensome thing, or it's hard. I mean, it's like life is difficult, right? And there's all these steps and this hard work that you have to go to achieve that thing or do that thing. So
yeah. I mean, here in the university environment, we're dealing mostly with students all the time, right? So in the big picture, they may feel kind of a contentment or something of tranquility around the big picture idea of, I'm going to become a civil engineer, and seeing or projecting oneself in that role brings a type of commitment. But there's a lot of obstacles between you and achievement of that goal, and going to the study sessions and practicing the problem sets, and some of that may be quite unpleasant. And so there's a way in which we can see the aim, the purpose, the final Thomistic theology, or in Aristotelian philosophy, you'd say the final cause, what makes it all worth it. And that's, that very much goes into the big sort of decision making, right? So in the abstract, someone might say, well, gosh, young people often have the questions about the person that I'm going to marry, and the difficulty of raising a family, and I don't know how I'm going to do it, and all of this. And, when you find the right person and you project yourself toward that ideal, well then, all the rest is worth it. But independently, it's like, who would say, I just really love changing babies' diapers. That's what I feel peace about that. Well, no, but the purpose, the final cause that's motivating all the rest, then that you can find love and value in those kind of repellent things to the senses, or the, your preferences and things, on account of the final cause. And us as educators, it's sometimes there's unpleasantness in the classroom environment. You're like, oh my gosh, why didn't you do the reading? Yeah. Why are you cutting corners on the assignments? Did you use AI just to answer my essay questions? And so a lot of that's unpleasant, but the purpose behind it is being a participant in the formation of young adults and sharing with them aspects of truth and of knowledge, and that makes all the rest of the classroom chaos worthwhile.
Yeah, definitely. And sort of the self-improvement world, you would say, what's your why behind why you're doing this? Kind of the same thing as sort of the final cause. You have a strong enough why, you can do anything. And the children thing, objectively, I love kids, but objectively you would say they're a terrible idea. They're just a money pit, and you got to change their diapers, and they're all this work. But when you find somebody, and then it's I heard it explained once, family is like a little trinity. You've got sort of the Father and Son, and the shared love is the Holy Spirit, and sort of the husband and the wife, and the shared love is the children. And you go, well, when you have all of that, it makes perfect sense why you would want to have plenty of children. But it's a matter of being in that right situation and having all those pieces come together before you can make any sort of decision about that.
Yeah. So and these are very common young adult conversations and reflections. You could tell I talk to college students all the time. It's who's coming through the door. It's okay. Well, it's a relationship. What's my future hold? I've just had a messy breakup with the person that I thought I cared about and thought cared about me, and what's next now? And
it's all over.
And others. But I think fundamentally, whether it's family, and not everybody's called to family. Obviously, I wasn't called to have children of my own, but in some aspects, I've got spiritual children, and I think not only priests. I think many in the role of education, whether they've got kids of their own or not, you're kind of end up in a role of spiritual parentage or intellectual parentage. But all of us, I think, are meant to. There's a piece that's missing within us if we don't have an aspect of service, that we're meant for community, and we're all the talents and gifts we're given. All of us are meant for lives that in some manner are lives of service toward others. Otherwise, if we're just self-centered, that's I think a lot of the French existentialists and stuff. If you're just alone and it's all in yourself, that's kind of like another kind of living in your own hell.
Right? Yeah. Yes. And so a large part, or at least a part of that work with college students, is each summer you go on the Camino de Santiago, the Way of St. James. And so maybe you talk a little bit about that, like what is that, and kind of what happens, what's the purpose of this Camino?
Sure. Yeah. So this is one of the great and ancient Christian practices. So for well over 1,000 years, there's been a route through northern Spain that would have brought pilgrims coming from France and from the adjacent regions, Navarra and such, that would take them to the west, kind of to the northwest corner of Spain, to the burial place, the cathedral that holds the tomb of St. James the Greater, one of the apostles. And the purpose of it, the pilgrimage is just sort of another word for travel, and in medieval times and in ancient times that was difficult. It was difficult to travel, but the purpose in Spain, it really was. It came about in the time period where it was impractical or impossible to travel to the Holy Land, to travel to Jerusalem itself, and to come near to the physical remains, the ruins and the relics of the past of the place where Jesus historically lived and walked. So as a proxy for that, kind of the next best thing that you could draw near to were the places where some of the apostles were buried, and thus Santiago became really, in certain phases of its period, the by far the most trafficked pilgrimage route in Europe. And when I bring students, that's the modality. Like, what's our purpose? What's the aim? We're pilgrims, and we have that identity as pilgrims because we have pointed ourselves toward this site, toward the cathedral where St. James is buried. And why are we doing that? We're doing that, to grow and to encounter God and encounter the wonder of God in our lives and in the journey around us, but as well in kind of walking through time as you approach that particular site of the tomb of the apostle, and kind of transporting ourselves in a spiritual sort of manner to be as near to that history of Christ as possible.
And it's about, I guess there's multiple routes, but that seems like the full route is probably close to 500 miles.
Yeah, more or less 500 miles. The most kind of the classic route is from just across the border with France, across the Pyrenees, in a small town called Saint Jean Pied de Port, Saint John at the foot of the mountain pass. It goes about 500 miles from there. Most people can do it in just a bit over a month. I think 33 days is kind of the classic pacing.
Oh, yeah. And so what's a typical day like out there? I mean, so that's probably about 15 miles a day or so you're walking? Yeah,
I think usually we average around 15 miles. So it's a great adventure, and it's in very beautiful and very varied kind of environmental countryside, as well as really beautiful historic churches and architecture and cathedrals and all the rest. But it's kind of like stripping life down to the basics, because part of the ethos of the Camino is that you pack your own belongings, the things you need, your change of clothes and this. And usually with my groups, we get up in the morning before the sun's hot, so you can get several hours of walking in the kind of pleasant, cool early morning hours. And along the way, you stop, get some food at one of the cafes. The food in Spain is really quite enjoyable. I'm a big fan of jamón serrano, so the type of Spanish cured ham is just excellent. It's excellent. It'd be kind of like Italians. It's a different recipe, but it's kind of parallel to prosciutto if you like prosciutto. But yeah, the basics are, you arrive all along the route. There are these pilgrim albergues. They're kind of basic hostels that have a big room, and usually you'll get a bunk bed. It might be maybe $12, $15 for your bed for the night, and you do your laundry, clean up, find some food, and usually you're tired enough you just want to sit down and rest your feet later in the afternoon, and then the next day begin again. And many of the towns have really lovely kind of medieval or early modern style churches, so it's nice to explore the churches in each of the towns as you go, and usually the pilgrims have some sort of prayer or a pilgrim's mass at the end of the day as you look forward to the day to come.
So I was going to ask, do you say mass, or do you go to one of these churches along the way for mass?
Well, kind of a mixture. So many of the places, if there's a pilgrim's mass that's going on, I'll join in and can celebrate. But then there's a few of the towns. I've done it enough now that I'm kind of familiar with the churches and the art of finding the sacristan or whoever has the key to open up the church and get you set up for mass. Okay. So that's a great thing about being a priest is, my other joke is I'm never late for mass. I'm on time. Other people could be late for mass or they're not going to start without me.
Right. Yeah. Yes. And so like as you're walking, kind of what is the sort of the mood? Is you're sort of like chit-chatting and talking, or is it everybody's kind of in deep contemplation, or how does that work?
It's kind of any and everything, you know. Me personally, I like to have a little bit of quiet in the morning, so I usually take kind of an hour where I try not to talk to people, and I try to reflect and appreciate the environment around me as well. When I start to talk, I become less perceptive.
Yes.
And it's like the time goes by and I'm like, wait a second, I didn't see anything of the vineyards and the fields and the mountains, and I'm just focused on my conversation. Yeah. So that's what I like to do, is take a little bit of meditative silent time at the beginning of the day. And then, you're walking in the same direction as many hundreds of other people. So it becomes quite interesting. Most people will start to talk to you, or you find somebody and start to talk with them. And quite often, really remarkable stories come out of this. I've met along the Camino people that have decided to go on this pilgrimage journey for a whole multitude of really fascinating reasons. Some of them, young and adventurous. Some of them, deeply, deeply spiritual. Some out of moments of themselves, kind of pivotal hinge moments in their own lives. This summer, I encountered people that that they've just recently lost a family member, or recently had a spouse that's passed away, and they're kind of they want to take a break and a space away from the familiar things of life and reset and figure out what's next. People packing along the way. I think it kind of came out of an idea. There was a movie called The Way a few years ago, but it's sort of become a trope of people taking the ashes of, one was taking the ashes of her sister along the Camino, kind of completing the journey on the behalf of someone else. But people that have, one year I encountered a guy from Belgium who said he had lost his job. He had a small house. He sold his house. Everything he currently owned was in his backpack, and he started on a bicycle until his bicycle broke down somewhere around the border with Belgium, and then he kept walking from there, and was still headed on to Santiago. So it's these are the intriguing stories that you get as you talk to others that are on this journey toward Santiago.
So it's not just you and 3 or 4 other students. It's just hundreds of people all together, kind of moving along together.
Right. Yeah. And once you kind of get in your rhythm, for all those days, everybody's going to be able to walk about the same distances. Sure. So, in sort of an odd fashion, like you don't feel like you're walking into towns where you're a stranger, because maybe you've not talked to these people, but you've seen a good selection of them multiple days or multiple weeks if you're doing the route that takes a month to do. It was kind of funny. It's when you get to Santiago, like you see people outside at restaurants and cafes, and it's kind of like the grand farewell. You're like, oh my gosh, yeah, we've talked 3 or 4 times on the Camino, and now you're about to go back home. And there was one year I did a short trip after we'd arrived in Santiago, and then I came back to Santiago like 4 or 5 days later. And of course, all the other pilgrims that had been walking at my pace, they'd already left and gone other places. And it was odd. I'm like, oh my gosh, now, like I don't recognize anybody in Santiago, as though like, you should, like you're going to your childhood town or something. Yeah. It's like, why should I recognize anybody in this city? But so it's a curious phenomena with really not much else I know of that's like that.
Yeah, and I was reading a story of there's a French pilgrimage, and I cannot think of the name right now, but he was a writer, and he was kind of spending a couple of days in the beginning of this pilgrimage, and he was really inspired. He's in his 50s. And by the number of like 19, 20-year-olds who were going on this pilgrimage, because they sort of wanted to keep the tradition of the church alive and all of these kind of ancient customs and practices. And he really felt very is hopeful and positive about the future. That you had so many young people who were being very traditional and very intentional about their worship and their spiritual life.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I tell people if they're going to do the Camino is kind of like try not to have any expectations. So part of it is sort of stripping life down to the basics, and really most of your day, like you feel this tremendous solidarity with all the other people that are walking with you, because like, you know, all of you are having the same your fatigue, everybody's feet, you know, kind of, you get some blisters, you're concerned about doing your laundry, that your laundry, if you hung it out to dry, that it dried from the previous day. Like, these are very like base level human needs that all of us share, that, you know, that we find the bread for our sandwich in the evening, right? These are, and there's something beautiful about that kind of communion, or that solidarity, and that it stretches across age groups and across nationalities. This year in particular, we seem to coincide with a lot of folks walking on the Camino from South Korea, and certainly European countries, kind of a concentration of folks from France and Germany and Italy, and then the Australians. There's always some Australians that seem quite adventurous and ready, and usually very spontaneous, like kind of guys in their mid or late 20s. And it's like, well, how did you decide? It's like, I heard about this like 3 days ago, but I was in Europe anyway, and I'm just decided I would walk for 500 miles. And so there is some kind of interesting aspects of the various countries, of how people find out about it, and what kind of motivates their understanding of what they're doing and why they want to do it.
Yeah, it was when I was in like 6th grade or something, we read a book called Walk Across America, and it's Peter Jenkins, and I love that book, and I actually read it a few years ago. I reread it as an adult, and it still was really very fascinating. This guy who decided, this is in the early 70s, and he's kind of on the, you know, the down end of the sort of the hippie movement and all that, and I think he was just very down on America, and somebody told him, well, don't put down America until you've actually seen it, and he's decided the best way to see America would be to walk across it. So he actually walked across the country, and along the way, like, has a conversion story where he goes to sort of a Pentecostal revival and all this sort of stuff. But so that's just instilled in me this desire to go on a long walk. I've always wanted to just walk, you know, go on a long walking trip, for, you know, walk the Appalachia, or do something along those lines, because it seems like such a it's just a fun and fascinating thing to do.
Yeah, well, and there's something funny about, I think, college students as well. Sometimes it's tremendously difficult to spark motivation in them around something that's simple. Yeah. You know, if I say to college students, sometimes I'm like, well, you know, we're just going to go, and all it'll cost you is a couple hours. You know, it's like, that doesn't inspire the will, or that doesn't inspire the vision or the dream. But on the flip side, you're like, yeah, I'm going to walk 500 miles. And they're like, oh yeah, that's worthwhile. And you're like, this is 100 times harder. And then why are you not interested in something that's far simpler, but you are interested in something but I think there's something to that in like how we are as people, you know. It's, you know, don't waste yourself on things that are trivial. Like, give me something that's worthwhile, that I can sink my teeth into, that is inspirational. And I tell some of them, I was like, you know, I don't know about me, but this is probably the farthest you're ever going to walk in your lifetime, you know, and it could be, right? Yeah. So it may be kind of one of those hinge moments in life that they talk about, you know, back when I was young, I walked on a great journey, and there's something marvelous about that.
Yeah. And so how do you and the students go about preparing to go on this Camino?
Well, I usually try to go on a kind of moderate hike with the students at least once or twice to sort of gauge and help them to gauge as well. Are they really ready to do the hiking? Can they pack? How much should they pack? Right. Sometimes the hike is the practice hike, so to speak, is a moment of realizing, oh my gosh, I really should not be having like a 40-pound bag like the Marines or something. I really need to pare this down so that it's maybe 20 pounds or something, that it's a bit lighter. I do that locally. Here we've got the Malabar Wildlife Preserve is nearby to campus, and I kind of found a route there that we can do a kind of 9-mile circle. And that, if students are happy and enthused after one of those hikes, I'm like, yeah, I think you'll make it, and just multiply that by 30, and you'll be to Santiago.
And so how many students total have you taken on this Camino?
So I've gone for the past 4 summers. I've gone with groups of one sort or another. And sometimes there are groups as small as 4 or 5 people, or 4 or 5 students. The biggest was a group. I had a group of 18 students, and I guess we were about 20 in total. So that's kind of the size. Anything bigger than that, it'd be a level. It's just too complicated on the logistics. You'd really have to get into, kind of a professional. I'm not a professional tour agent, so. You're talking about like needing buses to move people and get from your airport to your starting point and all of that. And, that's beyond my capacity. I try to keep it smaller and also that you can, walk into a lot of these are small restaurants or small cafes. And if you wander in with like a busload of 45 people, they just freak out, they're like, no one told us we don't have enough bread in the building to feed 45 people. We're ready for maybe 12 or 15 that might come through.
And is this, if a student wants to go on this, is the cost covered by the Catholic Campus Ministry, or do they pay their own way?
So the most recent trip I did, everybody, I'd say it was subsidized. So out of Campus Ministry, we were defraying part of the cost on a few of the things that we did in common, but principally, I told them the key costs are their plane ticket, so they had to get a round-trip plane ticket to get to Spain. And then once they were in country, I tell them to budget around $40, at least $40 a day. So you can make it on $40 a day if you're frugal, and if you're less frugal, well, you may need a little bit more. $40 to $60 is pretty doable. And I kind of like that because it also makes the young adults sort of weigh the trade-offs. Yeah. As am I going to spend more on my meal today, or am I going to save that for something else later on? And they make those decisions versus if I give them, everything's planned, then you get the grumbling of like, oh, the place we stayed wasn't so good. The food we had wasn't so good. And they don't really own those trade-offs or those decisions. But and one occasion, the students, I did get myself in trouble though, because the students were like they were more austere than I was. I'm like, no, we need, let's stop. Let's get some pastries for breakfast. I need my coffee. And they're like, well, we could just wait till we get to a grocery store. It's only 75 cents for a freshly baked baguette. And I'm like, okay. You're more of the like Franciscan there. I'm more of the, moderate enjoyment of life sort of, spend a little bit more and have a good breakfast. That'll make me happy.
Yes, yeah. You can't skip on the coffee, especially in Spain. Spanish coffee. It's delicious. So now you also teach some classes. I think this fall you're teaching is the Bible as literature, or
correct. Yeah. Okay. So this is one of those usually students in their junior or senior year. It's their free elective humanities course they get to pick.
Okay. And so what do you cover in that class?
Well, that's a good question, because the Bible's, if I was joking about I couldn't make it through the Bible in the year, I certainly can't make it through the Bible in a semester. Yeah. So it's maybe a little bit of, I don't know if I've got truth in advertising there with the biblical literature, but the subset, I tend to focus on the stories in Genesis, and then a very deep dive on the book First and Second Samuel, and there's some reasons there. I think First and Second Samuel is, in my opinion, one of the more artfully constructed literary pieces in the Bible. That you'd ask people, "What's it about?" The title Samuel, the prophet Samuel, yeah. But he's a relatively minor. He's instrumental, but he's not usually the protagonist in First and Second Samuel. It's really kind of an extended biography of the founding dynasty of King David, how King David gets to be king, and then how his story goes. And it's just very, very nuanced, very nuanced. David's not a simple heroic character. It's a messy family story, especially toward the end. So there's a lot of richness to work with there, and sometimes the students are surprised. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that's in the Bible." I'm like, "That's in the Bible. Yeah. That's in the Bible."
Yeah, the patriarchs tended to be very messy people, just in general. So
very much, yeah. I was talking to somebody yesterday. I'm like, it's the lesson of this kind of recurrence across family after family, generation after generation, in the story of these patriarchs is. It's really a story of kind of fraternal strife. Basically, anytime that there's brothers mentioned, it starts with Cain and Abel. Yeah. And it spirals from there. Cain kills Abel, and Jacob cheats his brother Esau, and then Esau is ready to kill him, and Jacob flees. That's Jacob who gets renamed as Israel, and Joseph and his brothers his extended family. They almost kill him, and then they sell him into slavery to go into Egypt. So a lot of these are stories of family strife, of troubles among those that should have the most compassion and love for one another, brothers or siblings in the same family. But I think the lessons for us, I think the big, zooming out, the big picture lesson is, I think, a lesson for all of humanity and all of time, is that we're meant to be living in harmony with one another, with fraternal love and solidarity. But so often that's not the case, because there's something amiss.
Yeah, and what it's interesting too about the book of Genesis, and there's the great podcast, The Symbolic World. Jonathan Pajot hosts it. He's an Orthodox Christian, but he's talked about that the first 12 books of Genesis, and I think this is actually one of the popes talked about this, that it's written in a very different style, in a very different way, especially the creation story. God creates things that are low and then high, and then, so he creates the fish of the waters, or he creates the waters and then the sky, and then the fish in the waters and the birds in the sky. And there's this very symbolic way that those, especially those first 12 chapters, are laid out. It's very different than, I think, the rest of the Bible. So there's a lot to sort of plumb the depths there, and to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, very much. And there's some basic tools of literature, literary analysis, without which it's impossible to understand what's trying to be communicated through the biblical texts. Something as simple as an understanding of the admixture in the book of Genesis between Hebrew prose and Hebrew poetry. Sometimes I hear people will come to me and they're like, "What's this quote mean?" And I'm like, well, first of all, like, to understand the meaning there, you need several things. You need to know what the words individually mean. You need to know what they mean together. But then you also need to know, what's the genre of the text that you're reading. And if you're trying to read literally something that's is in a section of poetic verse, you're probably making a major error, because language and words function differently between those two genres. So some of the basic tools of literature and literary analysis are aids, and I think they're essential, without which you can't understand and begin to have a discussion about what the meaning is.
Yeah, and I think one of the trickiest is I think the first 6 verses of Genesis chapter 6, where the Nephilim are sort of casually mentioned, and then we kind of move on. And so many discussions around who and what the Nephilim actually were or still are. And it is one of those things that people have pointed out that they're mentioning this with the understanding that the people reading this already knew like the full story. It's kind of like if I said, well, like after 9/11, things changed, things were different. 1,000 years from now, somebody reading would not really understand what 9/11 meant, what I meant by that, but you would, and the people I was talking to would be. So there's this kind of cultural thing in there in which it seems like the ancient readers would have understood all of this. They didn't need this whole explanation because there were other stories they were familiar with, which have been lost to us.
Yeah, and I think is there are instances like that where I think over the passage of time, some of the context has vanished, and thus the meaning is obscure. And I mean, there's even words in the Bible, so there's specific words that appear nowhere else.
Yeah.
Words that are words in Greek, words that are words in Hebrew, and the only place that they exist and survive is the one instance that they're used in the Bible. And there's a word, hypax legomenon is a word that happens only once. And so they're obviously, like, you're missing, presumably these were words that were used more commonly at one stage in the history of language, and loss has occurred over the passage of time. But I'd say the flip side of that coin is, particularly for some of the books that are more ancient, it's surprising, and part of what makes it kind of timeless is there's much there where the context isn't necessary, or in very few words with great paucity of expression, something that's understandable across generations and across centuries is present, and that's a characteristic of, really, I think, what had been the canon of the great works of literature. Most of them are that way. There's something understandable and profound that talks to people across the centuries. And the Bible's certainly that way. And the more you dig at it, the kind of more you realize, what you thought maybe was a tale for children. Some of the stories about the life of King David, everyone starts with David and Goliath.
Yeah.
And then you kind of work with it a little bit, and you're like, oh my gosh, no, this has so many layers of what it's saying and what it's talking about. And some of this is very much not a story for children.
Yes. Yeah. Or one of the things that struck me as kind of these sort of fractals, you'll see a particular kind of character or person or story arc that kind of gets repeated over and over again throughout the centuries, throughout the books of the Bible, and it kind of then sort of makes this bigger pattern of truth and understanding, and or maybe it's all kind of culminated in sort of the life of Jesus, and you see these things over and over again, and they sort of start to relate to each other, and you start to understand them better in that way.
Yeah, it's certainly. I think that's a very Augustinian way of looking at Scripture. The senses of Scripture, and then the allegorical sense in which so many of the stories and the accounts and the events and in the Hebrew Scripture have a modality of interpretation and as allegories for something about Christ or the life of Christ or the foundation of the church and its sacraments and its mission. Yeah,
and I have friends who take I think fundamentalists, I think we use as a pejorative, but they are very sort of literal Bible. They see the Bible very literally. There is no sort of allegory or anything there. And I'm like, well, that's fine, but I think you're missing out on a lot of depth and a lot of, if you thought about it in this way or looked at it in this way, there's, I think, more depth there and a greater understanding of life and what's happening than just a surface story,
Yeah, I mean, I challenge there. I think, I think it's kind of a category error that there's a misreading of how not only of certain passages of the Bible, if you're looking at it purely as kind of a surface level textual meaning, closer to literal sort of expression, but you're like, you can't function in life that way. Right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Sometimes I wonder, like, how do you interact, you read lots of things, and if you can't really distinguish between when someone's telling you a joke or they're jazzing up an account to be funny, and like if you can't perceive those gradations of communication, like you're going to be living your life in kind of constant awkwardness of miscommunication.
Yeah. And I worked with, he was a political scientist, he was dean of honors college, John Weil, and he was also a part-time minister. But he once described it as, that you have to wrestle with the scriptures, like sort of Jacob wrestled with the angel, and then you sort of get touched in a way that you're just never the same again after that. And I thought that was really good. You really have to get in and wrestle with the scriptures and wrestle with the books until they touch you and change you in a way. And then that's kind of your conversion or your moment there.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The wrestling, there's no guarantee that it's easy, or that at first or cursory reading is when I teach it as literature, it's as with any great work of literature, but the Bible, as people of faith, obviously we think the level of authorship there should be a sophistication, and there should be a depth that even exceeds some of the greatest works of literature, and so you should have to work more. You should have to wrestle more with it to tease out the depths of meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. So I could keep going on about the traditional Latin Mass, and we could do a whole thing on the Nephilim. But we've
I always try to dodge the Nephilim. I don't know if I did so artfully there, but there's these words. That's what it comes down to. Yeah. There's these words that are relics of, and that's the otherness of Scripture. There's things you scratch your head and you say, I've lost something. I've lost the context. Yeah. That clarifies precisely what this is about. Yeah.
But Sundays, 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. Mass here on campus. Then Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 12:05, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays, 12:30. Now that class is back in session.
Yes, that's right? Correct. Okay. That's the Mass schedule here on campus, and I tell Florida Tech students they should be delighted. They probably have, as a small college, this is rare to have a full-time Catholic chaplain here at your disposal. They probably have the best priest to student access ratio of any of our competitors. That's a value add differentiator here.
Yes, there you go. There you go. So come out. You hear one of Father Randall's award-winning homilies, and experience a great Mass here at Florida Tech. So, anything you last words you kind of want to close out with?
The freshmen have arrived for this new academic year, and I just wish them the very best. All of God's blessings as they endeavor to glean the full benefits of the gift they've been given here at part of the community at Florida Tech.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming out and your time here.
Thank you.